All right, Dave. So here we find ourselves on a dark and stormy November night, and this is the time of year I'm always look forward to because one, I'm a big Halloween guy, and I don't know, I just like this time of year. So we're very fortunate to have a guest tonight that kind of epitomizes the dark, stormy, spooky nature of this time of year, and that is someone I've known for quite a while, and that's Ross Allison from the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle-Tacoma. Ross, you're with us there?
I am here
Oh, good. It's
in
good to see
body
you.
and in spirit.
So we're going to start out just a little conversation here, and we'll see if we can learn something about you and kind of what your life's passion is. Um, now, if my memory serves me correct, and it probably doesn't at my advanced age, one of the first ghost hunting trips or investigations, maybe that's a better way to put it, that I went on was with you at the Western State Hospital, the old
Ah,
the Western State Hospital cemetery, and then the ward on the hill. Do you kind of remember that?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
That takes us way back. Oh my gosh.
yeah, that is way back. So tell us, what caused you to want to get involved in ghost hunting?
Well, I've always said I blame my mother. I have a
Okay.
mother that loves ghost stories, so I grew up listening to a lot of these stories. And I just was very fascinated with them. I wanted to know, was there really something happening when people made these claims? So for me, it was always just that curiosity. So that's from there, I just, started reading every book I could find on ghosts. And then I also, moved to California and got to, participate in a lot of events that Lloyd Auerbach was
Yeah,
presenting.
Lloyd. Yeah, I know
Oh,
about
yeah.
Lloyd.
Oh, yeah. So I just kind of carried that on to when I moved back to Washington, and it was back in 2000, and I wanted to continue, the field of ghost hunting and learn more about it. But there wasn't any ghost hunting groups at the time. There wasn't anything, that you could get involved in. So a friend of mine just said, why don't you start your own group? And so I did, and here I am.
20 some years later.
I
And
know.
I might say that on some level, I've always considered you kind of a role model because you have
Oh.
really done what you wanted to do, and you've built a successful career out of ghost hunting.
It's funny that you say that too, because if you would have told me when you met me that I'd be doing this full time, I probably would have laughed at you. I,
Yeah.
I really thought that this would have just been a little side thing, following my passion, a little hobbyist, ghost hunter. But yeah, today I am the only full-time ghost hunter, with, writing books, lecturing, doing tours, and then the ghost hunting alone. It's kept me pretty busy.
Yeah, it sounds like, and you're pretty successful. So, Dave, I have a tendency to want to monopolize the conversation. So if you want to jump in here and ask Ross something, feel free to do that. Um, so tell us how a ghost started.
Well, a ghost started due to the fact that, going back to my origin story, I had moved back to Washington. It was Halloween, in fact, and I wanted to do some ghost hunting because I hadn't been able to do it since I had moved back. And I knew this great cemetery down the street, and I thought, oh, this would be a great place, to do a little bit of ghost hunting. So I ended up calling all my buddies and said, hey guys, this is great cemetery down the street. Let's all go check it out. And they're like, yeah, that sounds awesome, but let's hit the bars first. Yeah. So, here's a bunch of my friends that wanted to go drinking before they go ghost hunting. And I realized, this is probably not a good idea to take a bunch of drunk guys in a cemetery. So I realized, there's got to be other people that are very serious about this. And so that's when my friend, had suggested, just start your own group, see what happens. And I put out a few flyers at, the colleges and a few local places, and it just really took off from there because I think a lot of people were wanting something like that to start here in the Northwest.
Um, now, you obviously know more about this than I do, but my sense is a ghost got pretty good size. There were quite a few people that
Hmm.
joined that organization. Is that true?
Oh yeah, we were at one point over 100 members.
Right.
Yeah,
I heard, and you can, this is a rumor, so you can dispel it, that you guys actually had a board of directors.
we did. We in the past we ran it with a board of directors just to keep things organized and keep everybody happy with what we were doing because I really with running an organization it has its challenges and it has its pluses as well. But it was something that I wanted us to be considered very serious about what we do. Some people said, you should be a nonprofit organization, and we tried that for a little bit too, but it really didn't change our status. It didn't, state that, oh, just because you're a nonprofit organization, you know more than anybody else, and that's not what I was trying to reflect. I was just trying to reflect the fact that, we were very serious about what we do because now, as ghost hunting's become so popular, so as, because of all the television shows, you have to understand, when I started a Ghost back in 2000, we were one out of 100 groups nationally. And half of those groups probably weren't even active. All right. Now, today, you become one out of 100 groups in each state.
Right.
That's how crazy it is. So, I was doing this before ghost hunting was popular, before you even had the inkling that you could, have your own television series. And so for me, I've always really pursued this field to be very serious, and I want to bring some of that credibility back because I feel that because of the popularity of ghost hunting and the sensationalism of television, that we've kind of lost grasp of the reality of real paranormal investigations. And so I really do strive to bring us back to reality and focus on the seriousness of what we do.
So for a while, probably about 5 years, I had a ghost hunting group in Olympia, and it was kind of a result of having been involved in one in Bellingham, which I really enjoyed the people. And somebody once asked me what the worst part of being in a ghost hunting group was, and I said, "Well, it's the group," because people get into fights and they don't want to do what you want to do, and so that kind of
And,
went by the
and
wayside.
Right, and that does become a problem, and I did find that that was kind of a problem, especially as my group got bigger and bigger.
Right.
You do find yourself in a situation where you're more focused on entertaining your members and not doing the actual research.
Yeah, true.
And that's where, at one point, and that's one of the reasons why we no longer have a board, is you just really have to stay focused on the goal of the organization, and that is to do the research. When you find yourself in a situation where you're having to spend more time trying to keep everybody happy, then you're in it for the wrong reasons. Or
That.
social groups that are out there that you can get involved with if you want to, just have the fun of ghost hunting. But if you want to be very serious about it, and I think that's one of the ways that we've weeded out a lot of those people, is we show that we really demand the work and the serious and the research in this field. And there's a lot of people that just don't want to do that. And I understand. It's all volunteer. We're not getting paid to do any of this.
Right.
If you think of this as a second job, then you probably don't want to do it. But me, I really enjoy it, the experiences you get to have when you actually get out there in the field and investigate.
Gosh, there's a lot of different ways we can go here. So let me go down this avenue. So in addition to the ghost hunting group, you referred to other things you do as your career. So you've got a business which I have been to in Seattle, Spooked in Seattle. Talk a little bit about that, how that came about, and the ghost tours that go out of there.
Well, unfortunately, the bad news is because of COVID, we had to close.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. So we're hoping once this gets taken care of, but right now, the government's not allowing us to do tours. So that's, we had to put a stop to that as well. But yeah, my career is basically, and I want to point out too, I make no money whatsoever doing the research through a ghost. A ghost does not charge any fees for investigating. I do want to make that very clear because for a bunch of different reasons. For one, I feel it affects credibility. When, somebody wants to say that we're just in it for the money, well, we're not charging for our services. It's absolutely free. Two, when people pay you for a service, they expect something in return. And in this field, you cannot guarantee that.
You can't guarantee that, can you?
Yeah, you can't. And for the third reason is, why would you want to put yourself in a position where somebody is experiencing true paranormal phenomena and they can't afford your services?
Right.
Then it
Yeah.
proves that you're not doing it for the right reasons.
The other thing I thought about, and we had this kind of discussion in our group. So, should we investigate? People would contact us and say, "We have a problem in our home. Can you come and help us?" And then there would be places that we would go investigate that were public. And I always really hesitated to go into somebody's home because I thought, Jesus, what if we make things worse in here instead of better? So I thought there was like a liability issue with investigating personal homes versus going to the Western State Hospital cemetery and hanging out there. Did you run across that issue too?
No, not necessarily, because I feel that if you're going into an environment, whether it's a public place or a private home, you have to go in with a level of respect. I don't feel, and it's never been an issue in the past, and knock on wood, you never know what to expect, but um, I don't feel that you're going to cause the owner any harm will if you're going into their property and you're being respectful. Now, if you're going to go in there and taunt the spirits to try and get some sort of proof that they're there, then yeah, you're probably, and I hate to say this, but you're probably going to piss it off, and then you might, cause some phenomena that will make it unfortunate for the owners. But I've always said, as long as you're respectful, and again, you always have to consider the fact that if you are dealing with something that is negative, if it's out to harm you, it would have done it by now. Most cases when we're called in is people just curious, or they're afraid because they don't know what to expect. Because now with the media pushing, especially demons, there's a lot more people afraid of whenever they experience even the lightest phenomena. Something, their door just slammed. Oh, it's a demon. And now they're calling us ready to sell their house. And we have to kind of go in and talk people off the ledge and say, hey, let's go, back to the beginning and figure out what's actually occurring here. Because it might have just been, the wind blew the door shut.
Right.
But you get a lot of that now because of the misconceptions that people give on a lot of these television shows.
Well, I've got a couple things, Dan, if I can jump in.
Yeah, jump right on me.
Got like 3 dozen things, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
12 minutes made me think of, but I'll stick to 1 or 2. And one of my tasks whenever we deal with this kind of information that's very complicated and subjective in some ways is I like to look for patterns. And because patterns tells me that there's a potentially a common thread running through a lot of different and again subjective a lot of times experiences. But I'd like to start by asking Ross, do you see a pattern in the people who, like yourself, are drawn to this phenomena?
Good question.
This phenomenon in the first place? I know whenever anyone asks Dan or I or anybody else in these kind of weird fields, why do you like UFOs? Why are you? The first answer is usually, because I find them fascinating. I find them interesting. But, interest isn't by itself enough to cause you to devote your life to a certain thing. And I think you used the word passion. I think that's more accurate in terms of what drives us to look at some of these anomalies. But why specifically ghosts? Is there an underlying desire to learn about the afterlife realm or past lives, or how ghosts potentially relate to other phenomena that are interested? I just wonder, more specifically, what draws you, and maybe do you see patterns among other people who are interested in a ghost in other organizations?
Well, I think a lot of it stems from our own curiosity to what's next. Is death truly the end? That is something that man has been curious about since the very beginning.
Right.
And I think life after death, stems from that because we want to believe that, life has a purpose. And so that also leads us into religion as well. So there's always that lingering question in the back of our mind, especially as we get older in life and we realize we're getting closer and closer to that bridge that we're going to have to cross eventually, that we want to know what's next in the life cycle. Um, and you see that a lot even with, folks like, death row convicts, they're on the verge of, being executed. And at that last few moments of their life, they want to accept God into their life because, again, you're down to that minuscule minute of knowing, well, what is next? What's going to happen to me? Am I going to go to hell? Is it just going to be poof, I'm gone, no existence whatsoever? So I think you have a lot of that in the mix. And then also, too, you got the media. Ghost hunting is a huge thing right now. Back when I started this, it was not a big deal. In fact, you'd be in a situation where you'd get more criticism than you would praises for what you did in this field. And now it's completely the opposite. Now, I tell people I'm a ghost hunter and everybody at the party wants to hang out with me. It's really come to that level. And so I think now most people, ghost hunting is kind of like, I don't want to say it's in your face because you choose to change the channel, but ghost hunting is pretty much on every network. So you have all these networks promoting their ghost hunting shows. So I think that has also stirred up a lot of curiosity as well. Not necessarily, is it, answering the question life after death, but it's also engaging our curiosity. Are we really alone in a room when we feel like there's somebody watching you? So that is also, started a lot of this as well. So those are kind of like the two main factors when it comes to ghost hunting, I would have to say. So I hope that answers your question.
I mean, that you mentioned in the very beginning here that the sensationalism aspect always creeps in, and it makes it more difficult for scientists. I consider you a scientist the way you're approaching this arena. It does make it more difficult because, of course, the producers are looking for stuff that tickles your monkey brain, puts you in the fight or flight, because that's exciting and that's sensationalism and it sells commercials and all that. But it does complicate matters, obviously. It's a double because it does increase the popularity. And like you said, you become a minor celebrity if you're involved in that, and maybe a major celebrity in Seattle at least. But the underlying implication that you've made here is that ghosts are somehow related to death, or possibly a bridge to death, or some sort of connection. And I'd like you to tell us for a couple minutes why you've concluded that. I think everyone kind of assumes that, but
that's the main thing is we do assume that. We don't have all the answers. There's really, and I hate to say this, but a lot of people like to call you an expert, but there's really no experts in the field. There's experiences. So there's experience. So when you got, somebody who says, oh yeah, I've been ghost hunting for 10 years, but I go out maybe, once or twice, every 6 months, that really doesn't give you a lot of experience because you learn in this field, it's all about being at the right place at the right time. For somebody like me that was going out, every weekend, it builds up a lot more of that experience. So I try to use that term rather than the expert. So I think, in all honesty, like you said, the another issue is because of the popularity of ghost hunting, you have a lot of people that claim to be experts in the field just because they've watched every episode of Ghost Hunters. Well, it doesn't make me a surgeon just because I've watched every episode of Grey's Anatomy.
Right.
Television shows have really altered the reality of ghost hunting because they do focus on the sensationalism, the thrill of, being alone in a dark, spooky place. Um, and so that has given a lot of people the misconception of ghost hunting itself. In fact, that's why there's so many groups out there now, but that's also why a lot of these groups don't last very long. The average life expectancy of a standard ghost hunting group is about 3 years, because they realize it's a lot more work, and things don't always happen like you hope they would happen. I've been in some of the most haunted places that you can imagine in the world. I got to visit the Amityville house.
Oh, cool.
Nothing. Yeah, nothing. But I can't say no, it's not haunted just because, I got to walk around for a few hours in the house. Again, it all goes back to being at the right place at the right time. And some of these people that try to get involved in the field don't have the education, the training that's needed, and they are going in with the false idea of what's to be expected because on every episode of, Ghost Adventures, crazy demon stuff is happening. But it doesn't always happen like that. In fact, a good majority of people would probably fall asleep on an average investigation, because it's a lot of sitting around in the dark, waiting patiently for something to happen.
I really can relate to that. I remember when I was with the Bellingham Observers of the Odd and Obscure Boo up in
Oh, yeah.
Bellingham. I spent 5 hours with another person in a room in the Stanwood Hotel. If you know where is that yeah, that's a hotel and bar. And not one goddamn thing happened. I was kind of bored out of my mind, expecting something to happen that never did.
Oh, yeah. And it's a lot of that, and people don't realize that when you're watching an hour television show, they've edited out a lot of the boring parts. They just go right to the excitement and what best tells the story. So yeah, it can be very boring, and sometimes you don't always get something, even when you're in a place that is, supposed to be the most haunted. And that's another misconception or problem that we have in this field is that when people do go into some of these places that are rumored to be the most haunted, then they expect to find something and they do everything they can to find something.
Right.
And that's when they analyze their, evidence to death, hoping that, something will come out of it, or they mislabel a lot of human errors because they want something to be there.
Well, I know Dan has a list of questions, so I'll let him get to that. I just had one more question as it relates to Seattle, and also getting back to the idea of finding some common patterns that would indicate that what ghosts are. If you have any indication, I mean, again, we consider them to be potentially part of death, part of the afterlife, the return of spirit, the maybe imprisonment of spirit in a realm between life and death. I mean, they're different models. I'm just curious.
And it all comes from people's personal beliefs too.
Yeah.
The most common belief is, that a ghost is our soul that has yet to cross over. Would be the number one, common belief. But there's a lot of different elements when it comes to hauntings. If it's an intelligent haunting, then yeah, you could very well be dealing with the spirit of somebody who has passed. But then a lot of people don't consider the fact that there's a lot of residual hauntings as well. And residual hauntings is just energy left behind from the dead, but people tend to forget the living can leave residual energy behind as well. A prime example is, if you move into a house and you hear somebody walking up and down the hall in the middle of the night, and of course you go out there, there's nobody there, but you hear it almost every night. Well, that could have been the previous owner may have left something behind because at one point in their life, they were going through a very stressful moment in their life, and they were pacing up and down the hall trying to figure out what they were going to do next, not knowing that that emotional state has somehow got recorded in the environment. We don't know how it happens, but sometimes these environments can record a certain moment. And now, whenever you're at the right place at the right time, you can experience that moment.
Right.
And so that moment could be from a living person. You yourself could have left something behind somewhere you lived in the past, or it could have been, just somebody who has now passed. So you got a residual haunting as well, but then you got a lot of psychological aspects or even psychic phenomena that are mislabeled as hauntings.
So it's very wide ranging, the spectrum here. You're talking about some human emotion being frozen in the matrix, to put it one way,
And
residual,
that's
and
the thing is, television shows make ghost hunting look so easy,
right.
and it's not.
And that's my
Because
point.
you have so many different elements to a haunting, so many
Yeah.
different, elements to the paranormal that it's you really have to fine tune your craft to have a better understanding of what you might be dealing with. And then the key word is might, because we don't have all the answers. One of the things I've always expressed to people is you have to go with what you know and not with what you think you know. And we could talk theories all night and not have answers, because that's basically what ghost hunting is. It's based off of theories. And we don't have enough knowledge to know exactly what it is we're truly experiencing. And the biggest problem now is because of the popularity of ghost hunting, is you've got a lot of people in the field who claim they know everything, and yet they know nothing, and all they do is muddy up the waters.
Right. That makes your job much more difficult, but
It
you're
does.
approaching it in the right way, is what it sounds like. You're incorporating across the spectrum of possibilities. The only way you determine what's more likely is, having lots of experiments, lots of investigations, and kind of getting an overview. So the last question I had was, as uh, ghost hauntings or the presence of ghosts relates to Seattle and the Seattle underground. Have you
Yeah.
seen, experienced, investigated? It's been a long time since I've been around, but that would seem to be a place you might get some
Oh yeah.
residual. So can you
Yeah.
tell us a bit about?
Well, the thing is that's one of the reasons why I started Spooked in Seattle, Ghost Tours, is because I had the opportunity to investigate a lot of these amazing places in the historic parts of Seattle.
Mhm.
And again, I'd have all this great information, this great evidence, and you really do have to publish your findings, because if you just sit on it, it does no good for anybody. And so I realized, well, I got a lot of this great information, and I had done ghost tours all over the world. And I found that a lot of these ghost tours were making up stories or dramatizing stories, just to give people the scare factor, the spooky chills. And as a paranormal investigator, I was frustrated because when I go on a ghost tour and I'd hear a great story about a location, I'm going to want to investigate that place. So I, pursue these places, try to get my foot in the door to investigate, and I'd find out, oh, these stories never happened.
Mm.
They just made them up on the ghost tour. And I was really ticked off about that.
Yeah.
I paid money, for these stories, and I was not given real stories, real cases, real experiences. And so knowing I had all this information about historic part of Seattle and throughout Seattle, this is one of the reasons why I also wrote the book Spooked in Seattle. Um, I wanted to put together a tour that took people to real haunted locations, told the real encounters, especially our own personal encounters, and shared the evidence that we had collected in our own investigations. And that's what led me to the Seattle Underground, where we had our own personal experiences and a lot of amazing places throughout Pioneer Square and around, Pike Place Market and all those other historic areas. And so I started to realize, which is funny because Seattle is one of the youngest, cities in the country. I was still surprised to find that we could be considered one of the most haunted as well, because
Yeah.
there was a lot of amazing stories, a lot of locations that I could take people to and validate that these places have real experiences.
Tell us about some other places in Seattle that would be on the list. And one of the things I got thinking about, but maybe because I'd heard some stories about, is Kel's Pub. in Seattle. That's kind of got an interesting vibe to it. So, what are some of the other places that would be on the list of most haunted in
Oh, well,
Seattle?
it's funny too because people always ask me what is the most haunted place, in the Seattle area, and I always say the underground. And I say the underground because I've had more experiences there. And that's because I've had more opportunities to investigate the place. Because again, we go back to the be in the right place at the right time. If you have the opportunity to be in, a location more often, you're probably going to have more experiences. I've been to places like Chillingham Castle, one of the most haunted, castles in the UK, and I may have had, one or two experiences. But when I go talk about the Seattle Underground, I could give you dozens of experiences that I've had there, just because I've been there more often. So Seattle Underground is one of my favorite places. There and another a great story to share to validate the phenomena is I remember one of my earlier investigations. One of the things that we had captured in one of the vault areas is we captured an EVP. Now, if anybody's not familiar with EVP, that is electronic voice phenomena. So those are voices that appear in our recorders that aren't supposed to be there. So when people watch ghost hunting shows, they'll see us ask questions into the air, and you leave, a certain amount of time, usually about, 12, 15 seconds of silence. And then when you play back your recording, within that silence, you will hear an answer to your question. Well, we were doing some EVPs in the underground, and we had asked, what is your name? And the response we got was Edward. And it was a very clear EVP. In fact, EVPs are graded by A, B, or C scale. And an A, class A is going to be, well, everybody agrees on what's being said. A class B is going to be maybe one person hears another thing, another person hears, something different. And a class, C is going to be, well, that there's something there, but no one can make out what's being said. So when you get a class A EVP where you ask, what is your name? And you clearly hear Edward, that makes it a pretty amazing find. Well, years go by, and we're talking, maybe 5 or 6 years later, another team goes down in the underground and they do their own investigation. Now, we had not communicated with each other. We had not, shared our evidence with each other. And come to find out, when they were in the exact same location we were in and asked the same question, what is your name? The response that they got was Eddie. So that only validates what we're trying to do here. When two different groups do two separate investigations, we hadn't communicated with each other, but yet we walk away with a very similar EVP where we got Edward and they got Eddie. That just makes it so much better in validating our experiences and that we are onto something here.
Well, and then the question for me is, um, and it gets back to some of the theories about, and you talked a little bit about this, the residual hauntings versus the more intelligent hauntings. So what does that EVP represent, or is that total conjecture? Are you communicating with an intelligent spirit, or
Well,
go with that.
there's two different things that you could be, dealing with. You could be dealing with something, an intelligent haunting, where obviously it's interacting with the living, it's answering your questions, or you could be dealing with psychic projection. Maybe somebody unaware on the team is, projecting that phenomena onto our recording device. And again, and there could be other theories out there too. But again, what I really try to focus my research on is go with what you know, not with what you think you know.
Right.
And so we really do have to narrow down the phenomena and try to pinpoint what it is we're actually capturing and how we are capturing it. When it comes to EVPs, we still don't understand how EVPs occur. How does it happen? How do we capture these voices? Does it go directly to the device itself? And you're also looking at a big gap of technology when, EVPs were captured on reel-to-reel recorders. And then now we're in the digital era where we're still capturing EVPs on digital format. So the technology has completely changed, but there has to be a common thread between all that technology to where we are today to still be able to capture the phenomena. And I still think in some ways we may be missing phenomena because we have given up on analog recorders,
Mm.
you know. So, those are still some of the mysteries when it comes to investigating the paranormal.
You might be familiar with Barry Taff,
Oh
Dr.
yeah,
Barry
Dr.
Taff.
Barry Taff, yes.
Okay, so he was on our show, and one of the things that he kept talking about, I don't know what Dave's reaction to this was, is he was talking about the entity case in particular. He felt that most of that was like psychokinetic projections from the person who was experiencing all the
Was
weird
it
stuff.
Carla was her name? I think it was.
Uh, well, all I remember is Barbara Hershey played her in
Playing
the
her.
movie.
Uh-huh.
Her, I think it was Doris something.
It was,
But
yeah,
but
Doris. I think it was Doris. That's
I
right.
had a hard time wrapping my head around that. That everything is a psychokinetic, like a poltergeist type of thing.
Exactly.
So what
And
do you
that's
think
where,
about that?
people get the idea of the term poltergeist is constantly being misused in the world of paranormal research because people tend to think that, poltergeist is just a ghost throwing, things around, and people don't seem to understand that the term poltergeist actually reflects on the ability of psychokinesis coming from an individual. It's not a ghost. And so that's one of the mishaps of ghost hunting is a lot of misinformation being misused, and when you constantly misuse that term, people accept it as for what they can today what they consider it to mean, and that word is one of the words is constantly being misused. So yeah, I do believe in that phenomena. Yeah, I believe it's very I should say I do believe it's very possible because again, when it comes to ghosts, we're not sure exactly where we are in our research because I don't feel that we have enough serious people involved in the field. We don't have a lot of people in the scientific field investigating this phenomena because one of the things that people said, why there's not a lot of money going into this research is because there's no profit in it. People will put money into researching the common cold to find a cure for the common cold because there's a profit in that. Um, Again, there's no profit in proving the paranormal. Um, so that's why there's not a lot of money and research going into this field. Um, but again, I do believe it's very possible. Our minds have been proven to do a lot of amazing things that we don't understand. There's the ability to heal ourselves. There's been a lot of cases out there where people were on their last legs. They were, scheduled to die within weeks, possibly months, and for some reason they were able to will their body to cure themselves of, serious illnesses like cancer. So there's that phenomena. There's just so many amazing things, cases where, a mother knows when her child is in danger, even though her child is, living thousands of miles away. There's that motherly instinct that, she knows there's something wrong, and she's on the phone, to her child, finding out, yes, there is something going on. So, when it comes to psychic phenomena, I think there is something to it. I don't ever claim to be a psychic, but I can be honest, with you. There have been times when I can walk into a place and it's just like, wow, there really is something here. I get that feeling, you know. And I tend to be right. I can go. There was one case where I walked into the room. I didn't know any information because I like to keep my team cold. So we don't like to know too much information when we go into an investigation site. And I like to go in cold a lot of the times. And I remember walking into one of the rooms and then just going, oh, I do not want to be in this room. And then come to find out after we, interviewed the client, that's the room that, a lot of this stuff happens. You know, maybe there is something that could explain it. Maybe it has something to do with the environment itself that affects us. Maybe it could be paranormal. Again, that's the biggest fascination when it comes to the paranormal is there's always more questions than there are answers. We're
Oh,
constantly
true.
digging a bigger and bigger hole.
So, and I'm thinking about kind of a discussion we had in our group, the techies versus the more sensitives. So if you were going to form a ghost hunting group, what would you try to do? You'd have a whole bunch of people who are interested in objective, measurable kind of things who could look at EMF meters and there's probably stuff I don't even know about as far as ghost hunting stuff. And then you'd find people who were more intuitive or sensitive. Is that a good mix in a team, or is that kind of a false dichotomy?
I think you can have a successful group having both. I have dabbled in both. I keep an open mind, especially when it does come to psychic phenomena. But again, you're also putting yourself in a position using the paranormal to prove the paranormal. So what you have to do if you are going to use psychics on your investigation is you have to protect yourself. You have to protect the psychic as well. You can't let them have any leading information. They can't go in and hear what's happening to the location and then proceed to do their, abilities. If they know too much information, it just affects their credibility, affects the team's credibility. So I've always told people, if you believe you're psychic or not, write down whatever your feelings are. Write it down. Don't say it out loud. Write it down. Because then when the team comes together and we go over our notes, you may find that there is some amazing things that you experience that you didn't know. Journaling is one of the key elements when investigating a paranormal location. Because now journaling helps keep the team accountable for everything they're doing. Where is everybody at certain times during an investigation? Because when we review our evidence and we are starting to see, oh, there was an odd noise at 10:15. Everybody pull out your journal. What was happening at 10:15? My team can tell you exactly what they were doing and what happened around that time. If somebody might have dropped something at 10:15, if they drop something, they write it down. And that helps us to debunk or even support possible evidence. But it also does the same thing when you're dealing with somebody who may be psychic or sensitive. Because, like I said, when I walked into that room and had that feeling, I wrote it down. And now, whenever I go back through everybody's journals and I find out that, everybody that walked into that room had that exact same feeling. We all wrote it down. We didn't tell each other because then that becomes leading information or suggestive. We just wrote it down. And so, like you're saying, there's your pattern. Those are some of the things that you have to look at. And so go with what you know, not with what you think you know. We know that everybody that walks into that room has that experience. Okay. So now we have to validate, is that something that has to do with the environment or is it paranormal? And that's where you start to unravel the mystery. So yes, you can have both. You just have to be very careful on how you proceed when you're using psychics. And I find writing everything down just helps building credibility for everybody.
Yeah, I think Dan's question led right into the one that I wanted to ask, and that is, there are, very few things in the psi phenomenon as an overarching term for what's going on here. But one of the things that appears to be a common thread is the intensity of emotion. I know even going back to, was it Project Stargate? Was that the one, Dan, with the psychics? The FBI was using psychics.
Or the CIA, was it the CIA?
Seems like it was
anyway, some.
They were probably all involved because they usually are, but it was to crack cold cases, or to see how a psychic would compare to regular investigation methods. But anyway, of course, they told the publicly, they said, oh, well, we tried it. It didn't really do much, so we abandoned it. And most of us don't believe that because we've heard that many times, and it's usually not true. It just went black. They just took it into the black budget and used it. But even in that conclusion that publicly was said to be not worth much, I remember a quote, I can't remember it exactly, but it said that they did discover that scenes, the psychic phenomena seemed to increase in relation to the intensity of emotion. And when we had our guest Isaac, who came on, he's a sensitive, for lack of a better term. I think that's what he calls himself. But he can walk into a room and kind of feel the history. Again, if you want to use the term residual energy, the positions of certain, energy patterns, whatever. But he said it was he could feel the emotions. And Ross said, when there's an emotional event, maybe pain, a child dies, and a mother feels it, and then you have this big project with the I think it's the oosphere with the eggs, the random number generators. It was in the Princeton Engineering Anomalies lab, which unfortunately doesn't exist, the research lab there with Dean Radin. But they position these random number generators all over the planet, and sometimes they get what can loosely be called a disturbance in the force, say a 9/11 attack or some giant natural disaster that kills tens or hundreds of thousands of people, and they feel these random number generators deviate from randomness for that moment. And this group correlates moments of high emotion with a divergence from randomness. So I'm wondering, Ross, how does this concept fit into what you see in your experiences and your investigations in terms of intensity of emotion increasing the paranormal activity or ghost presence and so on? And I understand it's hard to get a history maybe of places where you get anomalous readings, because you don't know what happened there 100 years ago.
Right.
How successful are you at kind of tracing back and seeing what happened? Was there a murder in this house? Was there a
Well,
suicide?
sometimes you find that most hauntings are based off of uh, uh, an event like that. You know, that there was a murder that took place in here, and people tend to want to think that the ghost haunting that place is the victim or the murderer. Um, but it's not that simple. You know, it's
Right.
just like saying, oh, Elvis Presley haunts this hotel because he spent the night here. Well, why would Elvis Presley haunt this hotel when he only spent one night there? That's another, big problem that we have in the paranormal field is people always want to identify their ghost. And it usually is somebody who was famous of the time or, because they're involved in some tragic event that took place there. And that's not always the case. Most times we can't always identify who might be haunting this place or why they may be haunting this place. And emotion does have a lot to do with it because you do find that some of these hauntings are tied to a very emotional event, a very tragic event. But again, it does not also state that just because that event happens there, that place is haunted as well, or it's haunted by that person. If you're looking at a hotel, think of the hundreds of thousands of people that have been in and out of that hotel.
Right.
The ghost could easily be some, elderly gentleman that came, for vacation and died in his sleep. And he may still think he's on vacation. That'd be a nice way to go, right? Permanent vacation, right? But again, due to the lack of information that we have about the other side, we tend to go with assumptions, or popular beliefs of what people think, and I don't work that way. I try not to be, or I should say, if you're trying to be scientific in your research, you can't be biased. You can't be led by popular beliefs or religious beliefs. You really do have to strip the phenomena down to the simplest forms as to what you're really experiencing. And so it is hard to solve the mystery of a ghost or why it's haunting when you're only given very little information. Like, the underground case where we two teams go in and we pick up the name, Edward or Eddie. Um, that's great, but without a last name, we still can't tell you who this Edward was, or what part in Seattle's history he played. So it would be nice to sit down, as some psychics will claim, to have a conversation with the other side. But again, you're now putting yourself in that position where you're using the paranormal to prove the paranormal, because now you have to validate, is this psychic credible or not? And even if you work with a very talented person or a very gifted person that you believe is psychic, it does not mean that they're always going to be correct all of the time. Even some of the most gifted psychics say they have their off days. And I believe that. I believe you're not always going to get the information you need, even if you are a credibly gifted psychic. And so it's just like that going into the paranormal field, going into a haunted location. You're not always given the information you need. Sometimes you have to go back numerous times just to get one tidbit of information, and that could just validate that there's something there. It doesn't tell us who it is. And it also leads us into some more problems that we have in this field, and that is that these investigators are using very suggestive tools in the field. And one of my biggest problems that I have, and I hate to say this because I know it starts a lot of fights, is I'm not a big supporter of the spirit box. It is too suggestive, and I've proven this in many classes. And if you're not familiar with the spirit box, this is where, they cycle through all the different radio stations, and you will ask questions into the air. And as it's cycling through, you'll listen for a response. And, and again, that's where it becomes very suggestive and even biased for some people, because one person can hear one thing and another person can hear another thing. But I've proven the fact that it is too suggestive to be proven paranormal by just recording 3 hours of it cycling and then playing it to a group thinking that it was live. And when they ask questions and they still get an answer off of something that was already pre-recorded, then that just goes to show how suggestive these devices are. Now, I'm not saying that the phenomena of what, and it's also called RVP, radio voice phenomena. This is something that goes back to the days before ghost boxes, when people were claiming that they would hear voices off of dead radio stations talking, through their radios, back when radios were more popular. So that was a phenomenon that was reported, and that is the basis behind the spirit box phenomena that people use on modern ghost hunts today. So, that's a big problem that we have in this field, is there's far too many devices that are being used in the field that are too suggestive. And I've seen groups go into a haunted location, pull out their spirit box, and a couple hours later, they claim that they've solved the mystery of what is now haunting this location. So.
I always have trouble pronouncing this. I think it's pareidolia. Are you familiar with that? So it's like seeing patterns where there aren't any.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the problem with the ghost box kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Pareidolia goes into looking for patterns, hearing patterns, because it's just how we operate as human beings. We try to process information very quickly so that we can respond right away. And so when you're listening to rambled noise or gibberish sounds where voices do come through, because you are going through radio stations and you'll come across, something, where somebody's talking. And so you'll have a lot of that as well. But then there's also, we have to consider the fact of chance. Chance plays a part of this as well. It's just like gambling. Every once in a while, you're going to pull the slot machine in it, you will win.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it does not prove that it's paranormal, but sometimes you will have a coincidence where something happens at the moment that you're expecting something to happen. Or when you ask for the number, how old are you? And you hear the word 13. Well, it could be just chance that by the time that was cycling through the radio stations, one of the radio announcers said, oh, the team won by 13 points, and so there's just that chance as well. So I really try to steer away from devices like that where it's just too suggestive. I feel if a spirit is really going to talk to you, EVP is one of the best ways that you have a harder time debunking when you know you're going when you're going through the process through the strict protocol that no one's making any noises. No one's making any sounds, and any sounds we do here during the EVP recordings, we state it out loud so we don't forget about it. That's another reason why journaling is so important.
So let's go back to this equipment thing because I think that's changed a bit since I have done ghost hunting. So let's say Dave wants to start. Dave owns a veterinary hospital in Lacey. So let's say Dave wants to start companion veterinary clinic and ghost hunting um, outfit. What kind of equipment? And realizing some of this is going to be limited by your budget.
It is.
What kind of equipment should he invest in?
Well, one of the things that I've always stated is you can go as cheap as you want to, very expensive. I've got easily close to, 30, $40,000 worth of equipment. That's because I'm very serious about it. But I don't expect everybody to run out there and spend thousands of dollars on equipment. But one of the true things that you should always focus on is audio and visual. It doesn't matter what the EMF readings are going to be or what the temperature readings are going to be. That's just a small part of a haunting. But when you can capture something visually and audibly, visual is going to be number one. And people want to see it to believe it. I think those are going to be your two key elements. Everything else is just to help support what you think you might be experiencing. One of the things that I always have to point out to people is there's no such thing as a ghost meter. Even though there are apps on your phone that say, oh, yeah, I'm a ghost meter.
Ghost meter.
Yeah. Or there's even a device that is labeled a ghost meter. It's just an EMF detector. There's no such thing as a ghost meter. There's no device that you can turn on in your room and tell you have a ghost in your room. Because we don't know what a ghost is made of. So that's why we can't develop a device like that. So what we do as paranormal investigators is we collect all the devices we can to help us read the room, read the environment, and help us to understand, are there changes in the environment that we can't explain? That is the best that we can do right now. So I would suggest for anybody starting out in the field, video, a high-end video camera, and you don't have to spend thousands of dollars. I would at least say spend a couple $100. Get yourself a high-end camera, video camera, if anything, because pictures can only tell you so much, and a high-end audio recorder. Because the highest the quality, the better you can analyze it in helping to prove it or debunk it. So those are the two key elements I would suggest.
So you might be familiar with, part of what drives me to do this kind of stuff is a huge fan of Art Bell growing up.
Oh, yes. I remember being on Art Bell.
Art Bell used to have a group out of Ogden, Utah, the Ghost Investigation Society, and they were having a big debate. Of course, this is a while ago, about whether or not you ought to use reel-to-reel recorders or digital recorders to do your EVPs. So, what would you say about those choices? Realizing most things are going to be digital.
I would say both. There's nothing wrong with doing both, because again, you're looking at two different processes of recording. Granted, our roots go back to reel-to-reel recorders. So don't forget our roots. Don't forget film. Film was a big part of this as well. We could very well be missing out on certain aspects of the paranormal by giving up on film and analog recording, because they capture the environment in a totally different way than with ones and zeros when it comes to digital format. All right. So there may be some sort of element to this that can still be captured with the analog, and again, we're still apparently capturing things with digital. So I would suggest both. See what is there a difference? And there have been even times when we go in with two digital recorders, and one digital recorder will capture a phenomena and the other one won't. So again, we don't know what the common thread in a lot of that is just yet. Because then if we did, then we'd be able to fine tune our investigation.
And then
Sounds fair. Go ahead, Dave.
An additional variable in these areas that makes it even more frustrating is that, and that is the possibility, I would say the likelihood actually of us, the investigators, interfering or interacting with that being investigated. So even if you have the best equipment in the world and you're all ready to catch every anomaly in the room, you may affect whether the anomaly will come through, or you may create your own anomaly, or the entity may react to your subconscious vibes or your emotions. I mean, so obviously, I've concluded that we cannot have a truly objective experiment in any arena, but we can take precautions. Obviously, that's what you're doing. What are your feelings about how we interact and how we affect the experiment?
And you're right about a lot of that because, like I said, this is one of the reasons why investigating the paranormal is so complicated. It is such a challenge because there are so many different elements to what can be labeled as a haunting, and that even includes the person living on the property. That even includes the investigators going into the property. We don't understand enough about ourselves, our bodies, our minds, and even how they project phenomena as well, or even the psychological aspect of it. We make mistakes all the time as human beings. And so I've always said if there was just one phenomena that was labeled ghosts, let's say the cabinet doors will open up at 6 o'clock in the morning every day. If that's the case, you have a ghost. But that's all that ever happens. All right. So you have a ghost whenever you wake up and your cabinet doors are all open. All right. If that is all we had to investigate, we would have the answers by now. But we don't. We have so many different aspects of the paranormal, whether it's visual, whether it's audio, whether it's physical, and so many different elements to all three of those as well. So it's really one of those things that you really have to fine tune your craft. You really have to, understand all these different elements and then whittle it down to that one specific thing that seems to be happening to get us a better understanding of what's happening when it comes to a ghost. Um, it is a very challenging and it is very frustrating. And it's also very frustrating to me when, somebody can go in and, charge, $300 and they've claimed that they've fixed you or cured you of all your ghosts,
And it also opens the door to skeptics to step all over your work because they say, well, you can't prove it could have been this, it could have been that, so therefore I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But
Right.
We know that there's something here. It's just very complicated, intertwined with so many different, matrices of reality, including the human psyche and soul. We know there's something there. Anyone who's looked into
Well,
this phenomenon knows, but it does make it very easy for a skeptic to dismiss everything, and a lot of people are so underinformed that they go with the skeptic, unfortunately.
and another issue that you have is, yeah, granted, skepticism is is an issue with this, but they're never going to believe whatever you submit unless they experience it for themselves. So, I have always said I could have a ghost walking right up to the camera going, "Boo, I'm a ghost," and then disappear. But if you aren't a believer in ghosts, you're just going to judge my credibility. A
Right.
simple fact. But when it comes to the psychological aspect of it and some of the problems that we also have, and I use this as an example, being that there's so many ghost hunting groups out there, and I've experienced this quite a bit, is someone will reach out to a ghost hunting group because they're experiencing some paranormal phenomena. And of course, this group will come in and lack of their education or whatever their beliefs are, especially if they're, claiming that there's demons in their home, have now, terrified this family, thinking that there's demons in their home, but yet they don't help the family and they just move on. And now this family's freaked out, thinking, something's out to get them. And so they call us as option B. And I have to go into this household where this family is terrified. They're on the verge of selling their property because another group has them convinced that it's demons in their home. And so a lot of times you can go in and do your best to talk these people off the ledge or to try and convince them that this is not paranormal phenomena. This is just your house settling, or, when the heater kicks on, it causes this noise over here. Those types of things you can, try to debunk. You can do everything within your power to try to bring them back to reality. But there's a lot of cases where they don't want to let go of that idea that it's a demon. And now you're not the right ghost hunting group for them because you don't believe what they believe. And I found that in many different situations. I found that in situations where we're the first group in, and we try to talk them out of the idea that this is not paranormal. Well, they'll turn around and find another group that will support their ideas. And so you really, can't win in that situation. You can do your best to try to educate people, and that's all I ever try to do. We don't ghost bust. We just try to learn ourselves what's going on out there, and we just try to pass on that education to the people out there.
Really goes to show you the power of someone's belief system.
Oh, yeah.
If they want to believe in something or not want to believe in something, good luck trying to change that.
Yeah, and that is the biggest problem, because now demons, and I hate to use the term demons, but that's become a popular thing because a lot of these shows want to push demons because it's scary. And so now everybody believes they have demons in their home.
Have you ever encountered something that you would
I,
call a demon?
I don't use the term demon, because if you're using the term demon, then you're bringing religious aspect into it. And there you're being biased in your research. And again, if you're trying to be scientific, you can't be biased in your research. And so I will state that, yes, there are negative energies out there, and there's very positive ones as well. And have I come across negative energy? Yes, I have. I actually had the opportunity to investigate the location where the true exorcist case took place.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So was that in Maryland?
No, St. Louis.
Oh, St. Louis, right? Okay.
Yeah, I was. What happened was I was in my lecture tours. I get invited to all these campuses all over the U.S. And I'll also do a ghost hunt after my lecture. So I'll do like an hour lecture, and then I take the students on a ghost hunt throughout their campus. Well, I was invited to St. Louis University, and St. Louis University was involved in the true exorcist case. Now, not the college itself, but the church on the campus. So I get invited out there. I do my lecture, and of course, we're getting ready to do the investigation. And they take me to a building right next to the church that was involved in that case. Now, history is that the church had owned this building, but they have now sold it to the campus. So we go through, the different floors. We're doing our little ghost hunts, and they take me to the fourth floor. And I'm surprised because the fourth floor is completely run down and abandoned. And what's really surprising about it is how huge it was up there. And I'm thinking, God, a campus this size, you'd think they'd utilize this space. And the students had told me that they've had so many paranormal problems up there that they've completely abandoned this space. And I was just, kind of curious about this. They told me that when the church had owned it, it used to be a, Sunday school on the fourth floor. The nuns used to live up on the fourth floor. There's old classrooms on the fourth floor. And so we continued to go through all the different rooms. And I had walked into this one room, and right when I walked into the room, I heard this crunch underneath my feet. And I looked down and I realized I had stepped on a dead bird. Now, I am accustomed to the fact that a lot of times being in abandoned places, you do run into dead animals. So it wasn't a big deal for me to see a dead bird in an abandoned fourth floor. So I just kind of kicked it over to the side so no one else would step on it. But to my surprise, when I shined the light through the rest of the room was just filled with dozens and dozens of dead birds.
Mm.
Now, excuse me, what made this odd was the fact that security had removed all the doors on the fourth floor. And they did this because they've had too many problems with students constantly sneaking up there to scare each other. And I realized that these birds had access to the whole fourth floor. Why did they all choose to die in this one room?
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently this is the room that the boy had stayed in. Now, if you're not familiar with the case, the story is that the church felt that they could not perform a full exorcism on the boy inside the church because this could possibly kill him. So they had actually moved him to a bunch of secret local locations and performed multiple exorcisms on the boy. So I am realizing I'm standing in a room where the boy had stayed for a short time and an exorcism had been performed in this room. So creep factor's now gone up. Now, I give some of the students some of the basic equipment, and we're standing in this room for no more than, I'd have to say, 5 minutes, when all of a sudden all the equipment goes off at the exact same time.
Mm.
We're talking the temperature started to drop in the room, and I could feel it getting colder, and I'm almost expecting to see my breath anytime soon. You know, the EMF detector is going off like crazy, and we can't figure out. Let me get some water here. Sorry, guys.
Sure.
I'm losing my voice here.
We're making you talk too much.
Right at the best part of the story.
Yeah, right.
I know. Oh, better. All right.
Being
So, as I said, the EMF detector is going off like crazy. The compass is spinning around and around and around and around, and it will not stop. And I'm like, oh my God, something is really happening here. Now, as a paranormal investigator, I got to document this. I got to prove that we are really experiencing this. Now, a picture's not going to prove that. So luckily, my camera shoots an infrared video. So I switch my camera over to video. I start filming everything that's going on. I'm filming the equipment going off. I'm filming, the experiences that we're having. And it starts to slow down a little bit. So I realize, okay, before this completely stops, I want to try for some EVP. So I start asking questions into the room. And I get to the question, can you tell me whose room this is? Now, there's about 12 seconds of silence. Then all of a sudden I start to hear crying to the left of me. And I turn and I realize that a couple of female students have started to cry because they're so terrified being in this room. So I realize, okay, they're uncomfortable. I have to admit, I'm a little uncomfortable too, because I don't have my normal ghost hunting team. This is just a bunch of college students following me around. And so for me, it's always safety first. So being I don't know what we're up against, I decide, what, let's go ahead and move on to another location. So we wrapped it up, I was hoping I'd be able to go back later that night and do my own little investigation, but we ran out of time. So I finished my lecture tour. I got home and I started reviewing all the evidence that I collected at all the campuses. And I got to that video. And I got to the part in the video where it asked, can you tell me whose room this is? I got 2 responses. In a male dominant voice, and I'll edit this because I don't know what your age range is here, but the first response was F you.
Oh, boy.
The second was, it's mine.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Did you have an involuntary movement of your bladder at that time?
I was pretty shocked. That's pretty. I'd have to state that. So when it comes to, I don't like to say demonic, but I will say yes, there are some very negative energies out there. But I've also said that there's also very negative people out there too.
Right.
And who's to say that when they pass on, they can't carry on those traits as well? So yes, there are some negative encounters that you can't experience.
That's a great story, and kind of a chilling story too.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. I figure we got about 15 more minutes with Ross, or he'll think that he doesn't have any way out of this conversation. So
Oh, this is great.
I've got a couple of things I was wondering about, and one of them I think you've already answered, but I'll ask the one that I don't know that we've addressed. So I tend to be kind of a believer in the universal theory of the strange. So if you looked under the word strange in the dictionary, you would see a picture of me waving at people because I've been into ghost hunting. I'm not really into ghost hunting as much anymore, but I spent a year doing Sasquatch research up in Bellingham, and now I'm a member of MUFON and
Mhm.
a member of their experiences research team, where we talk to people who've had encounters with, and I'll just use the word non-human intelligence. And so I was talking to somebody who's also in that same role, and I thought, well, how do we know all this stuff isn't tied together? We tend to separate it and say, well, ghosts are this, and Bigfoot is this, and aliens and UFOs are this, but I don't know if that's a good distinction. What do you think about that?
Well, I do have to say the world is full of a lot of mysteries. You know, we're constantly discovering new things, and there's a lot of things that we don't have the answers to. Um, so when it comes to the other elements of the paranormal, such as UFOs or crypto, um, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe that they all tie together. I just think that they're all parts of the mysteries of the world that we're still dabbling into. Um, I know there's a lot of people that want to say that they cross over, and I don't. If that was the case, then I guess if I was investigating a ghost in an attic, why didn't I see Bigfoot too? You
Yeah.
know, it's I know I'm being silly there, but I respect everybody's beliefs, and I have a lot of good friends. David Weatherly, who I work with on a lot of books together. I know he crosses over into the crypto and UFOs, and I think it's very fascinating. I do. I've seen some very interesting documentaries when it comes to otherworldly, encounters. Um, but for me, my passion has always been ghosts.
Hmm. Yeah.
I just love, curling up to a good ghost movie and over a Bigfoot movie. Sorry.
Well, hey, different strokes for different folks.
Oh yeah,
What
definitely,
what's your
definitely.
what's your favorite ghost movie?
Oh my God. There's a handful of them that I truly enjoy. I love some of the classics like The Entity. That's one of the movies that inspired me to pursue with this field. The Haunting, the old black and white one, another amazing, great psychological movie. Um, Awakening was another great one. I tend to like a lot of the period ones.
Hmm.
Like another great one is The Woman in Black.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yes, I love that one. Um, so I think those are some of my favorites when it comes to uh, ghosts. I like it when they keep it real. It's not all about the CG, ghost effects.
Yeah.
Like The Haunting, the black and white one. You never saw the ghost,
Yeah.
but yet you saw this amazing psychological thriller. Was her mind unraveling, throughout the movie. The Others is another good one. Sixth Sense is another good
Yeah,
one.
I watched the others recently, and I really was reminded how much I like that movie.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Well, Dave, do you have anything else for Ross?
Well, I understand um, the idea that Bigfoot may not be related to UFOs, which may not be related to ghosts, etc. So I think we should make a distinction between those areas, but I do also think they dwell sometimes in the same arena, so to speak. I think there is that, what did Jacques Vallée call it? The omniverse, or was
Hmm.
that Vallée who called? No, it was something between the objective and the subjective, the omnijective. It's somewhere in between that includes, the overlap between the psyche and psychic with what we call, uh, you know, reality or a shared reality, if there is such a thing, I think is, I don't know anyone who can really support the idea that there is an objective reality, because we all have very different views of even the same things that are sitting right in front of
Exactly.
us. But I do think that these areas have a foot or a toe in that shared other reality. And
Well,
so, you
you
know,
also could get into quantum physics and stuff, thinking that, we're not experiencing ghosts, we're experiencing,
Extra
loops in
dimensional
the time.
beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, we could throw out theories all night and not really have the answers to what's going on. Is it possible that ghosts, Bigfoot, and aliens are all part of that, otherworldly dimension crossing over into ours? It's very possible. You can't be in the paranormal field without having at least an open mind. That's how we get to pursuing a lot of these theories and whittling them down. But yeah, I'm open-minded. I'm not going to say that UFOs or bah humbug or why Sasquatch is just a joke. I'd be an idiot to say that, because I think there are some elements to this world we don't understand or haven't encountered enough or proven enough that they are out there or they're not out there. So you have to have an open mind in all these elements.
and you can only focus on so much at any given time, too. And
Right.
your focus has been on ghosts and everything that entails. And I mean, you can spend a lifetime looking at any of these particular subjects and just solve very little, but maybe the value is in the journey, learning little things along the way, and 100 years down the road, someone will pick up on it and maybe make a big discovery. But it's the journey that's the fun part.
Exactly.
And if you can make a living out of it, that's even better. I don't know how you. Kudos to you for
Yeah. Very.
out a career out of something that's very difficult to do that with.
Well, I do have to be honest. It's tough right now with COVID,
Yeah. It is.
especially because my element of making a living off of this is the social element. Doing tours, doing lectures. So right now I'm just back to just focusing on writing my books and getting by. Trying to stay
What are
safe.
you working on now as far as books?
I just finished Haunted Historic Hotels, so that's at the publisher right now. And the next one coming out is Haunted Prisons.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Yes, yes.
Would you send Dave a screenshot of one of your books? It could be your most recent one, or I have Spooked in Seattle. Yeah, just as a way to advertise that for you.
Oh, you can
It's
always,
on.
I was gonna say, if you want to find any of my books, you can go to Amazon
Yeah.
and just type in Ross Allison. I have a full page on all my books, so you can definitely do that.
Okay.
I would suggest too, people can always follow me on Facebook, even though I haven't been able to get back in my Facebook account because it was just hacked on the
Oh,
first, and so
right.
Facebook hasn't gotten back to me in helping me to get control over that again. But I always encourage people, follow me on Facebook. I do a lot of live feeds off of Facebook from all the places that I'm investigating, so that's always fun. Check out a ghost too. Ghost.org. We have a lot of our evidence up there. We are one of the most active groups out there. We travel all over the world investigating things, a lot of local stuff as well. We do road trips, do throughout the U.S. So we still are a very active group.
Well, I'd really like to thank you for being on with us. It was good to reconnect with you, and I don't know how our listenership will react to this, but I really enjoyed this conversation. And maybe we could have you come back another time and you could talk about something that we didn't talk about tonight, if you'd be up for that.
Oh, you bet. Definitely. It was a pleasure seeing you again.
Yeah, and we're always looking for other or not other looking for other ghosts. We're always looking for other guests. We've got some MUFON people coming. We've got a guy who's going to be talking to us about Mothman coming up.
Awesome.
can you suggest anybody who would be good guests to have on the podcast?
Definitely David Weatherly.
Yeah, that guy you mentioned.
Yeah, David
Okay.
Weatherly, he's been in the field for quite a bit, and so he can touch base on a lot of that. He's very well known for the Black-Eyed Children.
Oh.
Yeah, he's written a couple books on that. He's been doing a lot of crypto books. We do the Haunted series together, so we've done a lot of stuff together. He's also he wrote a haunted doll book. Our first book together was Haunted Toys. So yeah, so no, he's got a lot of great stuff. So yeah, just reach out to David Weatherly. Tell him Ross sent you.
How do you spell his last name? Weather?
Yeah. So weather, like as the physical weather, Ly.
Okay. Okay, so. Cool. Well, anything else, Dave?
No, I mean, I think we covered about an hour and a half, and we really covered a lot of things as we usually do. So, and Ross is very articulate and to the point, has a lot of good information. I'd like to take a look at some of his, his evidence in terms of the recordings and maybe video imagery. Is that on any particular site, or is that in books, or both?
Both. Some of the stuff you can find on our website at aghost.org. And if you have any trouble finding certain elements, let me know, and I can send it to you too. So, like if you wanted to hear the EVPs, that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always interesting listening to them.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Well, we're going to bid you a fond adieu, Ross, and enjoy your stay in the cold cemetery back there. And we'll be in touch again like I said, if you ever want to come on again, just let us know. We'd be happy to have you.
Oh, definitely let me know too. I'm always, it was a pleasure. So.
And if the COVID goes away, we'll get up there to Seattle and do the Spooked in Seattle.
Well, you're in Olympia, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in Tacoma, actually. So.
Okay.
That's a lot closer.
Yeah, we don't have to go that far. All right.
Well, definitely, it was a pleasure, gentlemen, and stay safe out there, okay?
Yeah, we'll do that. Thanks again, Ross.
Thank you.